surprised that we had mostly Torontonians, but we have people that register today that are joining us as far as Vancouver, Dublin, and Traverse City. So we've got some participants from the US as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And we're glad that we could all be together. The event that you'll enjoy today is part of a 4-week celebration of the start of a new green decade. Climate scientists have given us 10 years to turn things around, and there are solutions, awesome people like yourselves, community groups and businesses making amazing progress. So let's all celebrate all of our achievements, learn about solutions that we can and actions that we can take, and imagine what we can all do together and to be inspired to take action. We are very excited today about today's program and thankful to the organizers and presenters who have volunteered to make it happen. And thank you for joining us. We would like to begin by acknowledging and thanking the Indigenous peoples of this land. We are hosting this event today from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It is also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, we respectfully share this land acknowledgement as a way to recognize the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous peoples for time immemorial. We also ask participants to reflect on how we are all accountable to these relationships. So thanks again for joining us. Now let's get the program started. So together we can all make this great efforts in the Green New Decade. So let's celebrate, learn, and enjoy and take action. So first of all, before we jump into our workshop component, I want to introduce a friend and colleague of mine, Helen Frank. She's the owner of Helen Men's TO, and she's going to say a few words to the group today about her experience in running a small mending and repair business just right here in Toronto, and how mending and repair can help extend the life of your wardrobe by making your clothes last longer, which can help to reduce waste and save money. Helen Frank is a self-taught seamstress from Toronto. She started making clothing for her dolls when she was just 4 years old and has combined her love of sewing with her love of the environment and her business, Helen Men's. Helen mends clothing and upcycles natural fiber textiles into products that replace plastics. Helen?
Hi. So as Annette said, I run a business called Helen Men's, and my business has 2 parts to it. One of them is the upcycling of recycled and upcycled materials into new things that replace disposable items. And the other half is the mending. And I've been doing it for 2 years now. And both parts have the ultimate goal of reducing the amount of textiles going to landfill. So very, very much in line with what we're doing today. Now, the average person in North America actually sends 81 pounds of textiles a year to landfill. And, you know, I don't have the goal of reducing that to nothing. I don't think that that's completely possible, but it is possible to reduce it by quite a bit. And the top ways that I think of as doing that would be to buy clothing that will last through lots of washes. So that means buying things that are made from a single fiber or a natural fiber, especially. Buying clothes that will be easier to repair down the road. That means buying things that aren't going to get destroyed easily. Buying things that, again, are not made from like mixed textiles. The reason being that when you have 2 different kinds of fibers in an item, it's more likely to get those pills all over it. And then it doesn't look nice for very long. And lastly, buying clothing in styles that are going to last more than a year. So I don't know how many people in this workshop went out and bought a cold shoulder top a couple years ago. Those are, you know, they were meant to last a season. They were meant to look new for a season. So that's the kind of thing I think about when I'm buying my clothes in the first place. And then you get to the mending. And in my first year of business alone, not since I started it, but just the first year, I mended over 1,600 items. And I wanted to give people today a little bit of a taste of the kind of things that I do for mending. So I have a list. I replaced zippers replaced just the pulls on zippers. I darn knit items, sweaters, socks, t-shirts, leggings. I hem pants to cover warm bottoms. I patch jeans, patch pants, patch shirts, patch coats, patch bags. I sew new buttons onto things. Not the most glamorous, but it helps. I replace snaps, replace Velcro. I have fixed the mesh on several beekeeping suits. I replace the elastic on people's reusable masks, on their leggings, on their bras. I fix stuffed animals, which is always a very rewarding job. I rehem curtains and towels to hide worn edges. I embroider or patch to cover stains and holes. I can do machine darning in areas that are weakened but not yet holes. I've replaced the lining in coats and jacket, and I am the #1 mender of Kevlar chainsaw pants in Ontario. All the arborists know to come to me. And I have one more option too in my business for people who want their things mended but can't necessarily pay me or think that it's easier than it actually is. And that's that before COVID and hopefully after COVID, I teach a weekly sewing drop-in. So people come to my home for 3 hours on a Wednesday night. I have machines available and materials available, and you can bring a project and we'll work through it together. And that really brings me to my favorite part of my business, which is the excitement that you get from people when you tell them that you can fix their favorite things or just keep them from having to throw things out. Just the level of enthusiasm and energy that it brings to people is really, really rewarding. It makes me feel really hopeful for the future, for these next 10 years that are so crucial, because people really want to do better. And they're really, really excited at the idea that this thing that they hadn't necessarily thought about before or had thought was very limited is a real possibility that isn't as complicated as they might have thought. So I find very reassuring. Yeah. In fact, when I started my business, I thought it was going to be a hobby. I thought it was going to be Saturday mornings. I would sit there and I'd sew on some buttons and then I'd leave. And within 2 weeks, I knew that I had something that could be a full-time job. And it has been for the last 2 years. And I'm so excited that it has the momentum to keep going through COVID, through market shutdowns, through everything. So let's hope for the next 10 years of it too. And enjoy your workshop.
Thanks so much, Helen. And actually, one of the things that Helen inspired me to do, actually, I had purchased a sweater some time ago, and the first day I wore it, I got a stain on it and a pen exploded. And then I realized that in looking through her stuff, I could actually put and make it a personalized sweater. So she put a nice Canadian pouch on it, as well as some old Boy Scout vacuum cleaner and jogging. So now I have a sweater that's extra special to me and a little bit funny. And so there's a lot of creative ways to extend the life of your clothing. So thanks so much, Helen. And now just moving on, I'm going to do a little bit of a short intro for our core moderator today, Leah Sanchez. So Leah co-founded the Works in Progress Art Collective, or Eco Art Collective, with Tanya Murdoch in 2018. And Leah graduated from the Arts, Education, and Community Engagement postgraduate program of Centennial College that same year, and is currently the Education and Interpretation Coordinator at the Textile Museum of Canada in Toronto. She has extensive work experience as an architect and as an owner of an upcycled furniture company in Manila, Philippines, and has been using her education and experience to deliver arts-based programs focusing on reuse and upcycling. Since coming to Canada in 2016, and with members of her Works in Progress community, she has been part of organizing community initiatives such as clothing and book swaps, and leading upcycled workshops in a variety of contexts, including community fairs, maker festivals, farmers market, and the museum. More information will be provided on the Textile Museum of Canada, as well as works in progress. So thank you so much, Leah, for moderating today's session.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Annette, for that introduction. As Annette mentioned, so I'm from the Textile Museum of Canada, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this Sustainable Textile Teach-In. This teach-in is, we offer these teach-ins once or twice a month, and they focus on textile practices that promote reuse, reducing waste, and upcycling. These workshops are made possible with the support of the Chalkers Foundation. So please check out our website. We have a few more workshops coming up this year. We have 2 workshops coming up in November and 2 more in December. And also, I just wanted to say that in the spirit of like EcoFair and the Waste Reduction Week, that I think it's a little known fact about the museum, but we have been receiving like textile donations for over 20 years. And pre-pandemic, with the help of our amazing volunteers, we would hold these textile sales. And they were usually in the St. Clair neighborhood, actually. And, you know, it's a great way to, as makers, it's a great way to find really, really good quality materials at affordable prices. So now we're shifting our sales to an online platform. So, you know, again, visit our website or follow us on social media, because we're going to be posting like items for sale or possibly like a pop-up sale coming up. Anyway, so I'd like to introduce Tanya Murdoch and Marnie Saskin of Works in Progress. They'll be facilitating this workshop, and I'm really looking forward to this. This is our 4th workshop working together with the museum, and it's always a fun program. So just short bio on Tanya Murdoch. Tanya uses art and video to support and celebrate community and eco initiatives, and produces videos for community groups and artists under her own brand, Homemade TV. Tanya has worked as an editor for City TV since 2001, and before that, she worked at Reuters Television Tokyo after graduating with a BFA from NSCAD in Halifax. So she's led and supported eco and community building projects for over 10 years in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood as an artist, project leader, and volunteer coordinator. She served as an artist in residence at Davisville Public School and at the University of Toronto Faculty of Law. So as Annette mentioned, in 2018, she and I co-founded Works in Progress Art Collective to build and expand on our work in the schools and the community. And our other facilitator is Marnie Saskin, also a member of Works in Progress. And Marnie is a textile artist and a longtime community collaborator within the worlds of making, food security, and poverty reduction. With a background in mathematics and English literature, she worked as a healthcare research assistant for a few years before building on her Mennonite background in farming and textile arts to set up an online upcycled clothing and quilt shop. So she's volunteered and taken leadership roles in local food sustainability and poverty reduction initiatives, specifically the Shoelace Collective and Not Far from the Tree. After 2 decades of living and homeschooling in Toronto, she moved to Hamilton with her family. Her daughter shares her love of textiles and costuming, and for the past 2 years, they've exhibited at shows and curated displays with the Burlington Hand Weavers and Spinners Guild. So I'd like to turn it over to Tanya and Marnie now.
Hi.
Hi, thanks, Leah.
Thank you, Leah. That was a great thing.
Now the workshop's over. Yeah, I just want to say a quick thing before Marnie starts, because Marnie's going to be the one who's kind of leading the how-to part of this. She's got a lot more textile experience than either Leah or I do, but we all share an enthusiasm for trying things and for seeing what we can make from other things. And something else we do as a collective is we also organize clothing swaps, because there's just so many things in the world. Like you said, it's really nice to have people see that they can pass things on. They can repair things a little bit, and it shows their love rather than their, they're taking care of their things and helping them to have a better life, and they can pass them on to their friends and neighbors. So Marnie's going to show you a bit of how to do that and talk a bit more about that. And I'll just jump in with questions because I always have questions. Go ahead, Marnie.
Yeah, it's always nice because Tanya is, she's my co-conspirator. Textile co-conspirator. Hi, everyone. I really appreciated Helen Frank's introduction because it's a really good welcoming foray into the world of textile maintenance, I guess. Mm-hmm. There's lots of different ways you can approach reduction of waste in the textile stream, and just straight up repairs is one of those things, and it's such valuable work, and many people don't understand how much time it actually takes. I really appreciate Helen's work, and I actually look forward to looking up a little bit more about her because I think it's going to be a fun collaboration in the future. What I do is I also like to make new things from old things. I am a big wool fan. It's one of the sturdiest textiles out there, and also the timing of the weather is right. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about wool because I really, really love its versatility and its usefulness. I did see that there was a mention of sashiko style mending. I am in no way an expert on sashiko. I highly recommend finding YouTube tutorials or finding books from experts on that. This is a riff on it. It's just using seed stitch to mend things. One kind of thing to mention is this: if you have any questions, so we are really happy to take questions while the workshop's going on. So you can always chat your questions. And we have people watching the chat. I really like to keep workshops a little bit more interactive, mostly because I end up learning a lot from everybody who attends. So there are always really knowledgeable people with just coming from things from a different perspective. So I really appreciate people's questions. You can also, you have a little put up your hand. There's a reactions thing somewhere on your screen. So you can always put up your hand to ask a question if you want to ask a question directly of me during the workshop. We can try that too. There's quite a few participants, so please be patient. If someone doesn't see your hand right away, you could also do a little chat thing going, hey, my hand's up. If you want to actually talk to a person and get feedback. Okay. How is everybody? Okay, so you can see from, I don't know if you guys can all see the demo table here.
Yeah.
I'm going to divide how I talk about this into kind of two methods based on what kind of textile you want to repair. There's basically two kinds of textiles. I'm going to keep things really basic because I don't know, it's a good place to start. You can always, no matter how experienced you are, coming back to basics is always useful. I like to be reminded of things. Oh, right. Yeah, that's why we do this. Okay. So I'm going to start with basics. So one of the basics is there are basically two kinds of materials. One is woven. So I don't know if you can see from this, it's a very, unless there's spandex or something in it, it's a very stiff. It's not going to have a lot of give. Okay, this is called plain weave. It's just over, under, just like the same kind of weaving you did when you were a kid in art class. And you usually find it in jeans, in button-up shirts, that kind of thing. The other kind of textile would be something that's knit or crocheted. So this is where you're making a lot of loops that are all interlaced together. And you can see that there's lots of give on it. When you are making things from old things into new things, the advantage of using knits is that when you cut, it doesn't fray, all right? So knits, when you cut them, they won't fray, their edge stays. So you will actually see on my little pair of socks here that I made, So this is a pair of socks that I made my husband a long time ago, clearly. I just cut them out of an old sweater. So I cut them, I kept the seams on the outside because he doesn't like seams, and I made a pair of socks. Mostly because wool socks are really expensive. And I really like wool socks because they're sturdy. They absorb moisture when you are out hiking or something, but they still keep your feet warm. Unlike cotton, or if you wear cotton socks and you're exerting yourself, they're just going to feel clammy after a while. But wool socks will always keep you warm. Can I talk
for days too?
Can I talk to you more about how much I love wool? So you can see that there's an edge here from my seam. I haven't finished that edge. That is just 2 pieces of knit sewn together. And this part here is just going to stay. It's not going to fray. Whereas if I have a seam on something that's woven, so you'll see, like a lot of your clothes, you'll see the edges are finished. Because if I just leave that, it's going to fray, and it's going to do something like this. See how that's all coming apart? All right, so there's 2 different techniques that we're going to talk about. Actually, one of them is transferable, one thing to the other. But we're going to talk about kind of 2 different ways to handle mending a hole. How is everybody doing? Does anybody have any questions so far?
Yeah, Marnie. Hi.
Hi.
So Lee just had a question, sort of a question comment. So hand knit items are different? Do they unravel?
No.
Hand knit?
So this is the interesting thing. And I see somebody that said wool can be scratched.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get all like defensive now. My daughter spins. She hand spins wool, and yeah, I can tell you that there's a broad range of how wool will feel on you. We always test things around our neck if we're going to be making something that's going to be on a body. Merino generally is not scratchy. You generally will be able to find a wool that, unless you're allergic to the dander in wool, you will be able to find a wool that is comfortable. Feet are pretty, I don't know. My husband's, he's gonna be like, why are you talking about my feet? My husband's feet are kind of impervious to scratchiness. So actually this was a merino sweater, so it's kind of soft. So it should be okay. Now the other question was that hand knit items are not any different from any other knit. So if you have a really bulky knit, you might get just a not as well-defined edge. The loops on it when you cut it will just be bigger, and you might have to give yourself more of an edge when you cut it, because generally hand knit stuff, it's not as finely knit as machine knit, but a hand knit is not any different than any other knit material. Does that help? Like you can if you've not done your knitting, then yeah. So I've tried to knit like 4 different times. I am not a knitter, and I always lose stitches. So yeah, if you're not done your knitting, if that end bit is not done, then yeah, it'll unravel. But when you cut it, it won't. So hopefully that helps. Okay. Someone's saying they'd love a pattern for my socks.
Yeah.
It's I bet you if you Pinterest it, it'll show up. I'll show you a side view. So it's really just literally I cut out a sole and a top and a back. And I used the end of the arm. That's the cuff on the arm. I used that at the top.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you a basic kind of stitch that is really applicable to both wovens and knits. And first I'm going to show you why we do it this way. Here is, okay, so I'm going to hold it up. This is a merino undershirt. I scored this at Value Village, where they did not know the value of wool, and they priced it really inexpensively, and I snagged like 3 of them. So I have a really finely knit merino undershirt that obviously is well loved. So I have a hole in it. I'm going to find a smaller hole because I know there's more than one on this one. Nope, that's a bigger hole. We're going to start with this one. Okay, so here's my hole. Holes in clothing are kind of like relationships. Repairing relationships, you don't want to force the two things together under tension. Okay, so if I take I'm going to thread my needle and I'm going to show you. Come on. And yes, I lick my thread when I thread my needle. Okay. Let me get a smaller needle here.
Hey, Marnie, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Talking about knits, something that surprised me was like t-shirts are knits as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you can repair them the same way, like you're doing. Like this actually looks like a t-shirt on here, but you said it's a merino wool.
It is a t-shirt. It's a wool t-shirt. So
it's a wool t-shirt. Okay.
Super extra comfy. Yeah, t-shirts are great, and besides which, you can play with them then too. If you have a t-shirt that's too short, you can literally cut it off. If you want to extend it, you can add two t-shirts together with just one seam. They're really a lot of fun.
Okay.
So if I wanted to repair this, and I just was like, oh, I know what a seam is. I'm going to put these two sides together. I'm going to make a knot in my thread. And I'm just going to do this. I know what a seam is. I'm just going to sew these together. Okay.
Is this what not to do?
This is what not to do.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Don't do this. Don't do this.
Okay.
So I have made a very rudimentary seam where I've just used a straight up and down stitch. And now when I put that under tension, I'm going to pretend I knotted it at the end. You'll see that it pulls. So it eventually over time, what happens is that the thread itself will cut the knit. Okay. So just repairing a hole like this, where I'm going to put the two sides together, especially in knits, it might work a bit better on wovens, but with knits, because there's so much give in a knit, you will always be pulling at that stitch if it's just a straight stitch, and it'll eventually tear again really easily. What you want to do with a hole like that is you want to bring the two sides together in a supportive atmosphere, right? Just like repairing a relationship. So what I'm going to do is, so there's two ways to do this. One is I'm actually going to do a ladder stitch. And I think we have a picture of a ladder stitch somewhere, right?
Yeah. Okay. Should I show it? Do you want me
to? Yeah, that'd be helpful. Yeah. And I'll show it.
Okay.
Get my hand in here. Clean this up a little bit.
Does this help?
We'll get there.
You can't see the.
Can you still see
the final? Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You still see the demo table?
Yeah, you can for the side.
Okay. All right. So we're just going to do a ladder stitch. I'm just going to do this because it's actually just. I'm going to put a patch on this. All right. Oh, someone's asking about thread. Mm-hmm. For this, just straight up patching, I can totally just use, like it's not a yarn, it's just an embroidery thread. That's fine.
So it doesn't have to be a stretchy thread?
Not for this
stretchy materials?
Not for this kind of repair. Okay. So I would do a ladder stitch where I'm just coming up from one side to the other. And Leah's got, I think there's a knot in this. Darn it.
Well, I'm not showing it now because we're watching you.
We're watching you. It's fascinating.
Okay. So I'm
riveting.
going to go from one side to the other, and I'm going to do a little.
Hey, Marnie, is this the inside of the sweater or the outside?
It doesn't matter. I'm going to put a patch over it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly do a ladder stitch. So this is a kind of repair on a hole in a knit that will take a little less time than the seed stitch and the repair on the sock that I'm going to show.
Okay.
Might help if you used a contrasting color thread. So
that would have helped. I was being all clever with my matching thread.
Well, that's when you're doing it for reality, but for demonstration.
Okay. Does
Yeah.
that help if I show it a little bit better?
Yeah, I can see it there. It's almost like a shoelacing.
Yeah, it looks like shoelacing. So I'm going to get it
Okay.
down. Let's pretend I did that the whole way because no one can see my thread. And I'm going to pull it together. Okay, just really gently. Okay, and it's just gonna start this patch. So I would pull this whole thing together, and it'll kind of disappear. Okay.
Okay. So you would do this if there's not like if it's not torn on the sides, like it's just a straight across line.
Yeah, it's not pulling as much on the sides because I have the little up stitches to support on both sides. So it's not going to pull as much. Okay. So
Okay.
but this is mostly to make sure that it doesn't keep ripping underneath my patch. Okay. So I would do that. And then, so I'm just giving you a quick and easy and dirty. Let's pretend those two sides are together.
Is that the inside or the outside of the fabric?
It actually doesn't matter for the beginning. So for this, I mean, it depends on yeah, it doesn't really matter because we're talking about visible mending. I'm going to put my patch on the outside. I'm going to segue for a second.
Sure.
One of the
I'll put you up there.
Okay. Put my face on.
Yeah.
What I'm really appreciating about the shift in paradigm to visible mending, and I know different cultures have longer standing traditions perhaps than North American tradition of mending. What I'm appreciating about the shift in paradigm is when I was a kid, mending was something that was kept hidden because you were poor. So my mom made meticulous repairs to make sure that I passed. Okay, that I passed as that we passed as a family who were, you know, stable and well off. And then you'd get those jeans with she'd buy the patches too. Sometimes you get those stiff kind of square patches on your jeans, like those telltale ones. So it's a class thing, right? When I was a kid, mending was a class thing. It wasn't always about making things last. It was, you know, something that you kept hidden. Didn't want to, you wanted to hide the patch because it was more socially acceptable. It looked better, right? It didn't look like it had been worn. Which is really funny because like I wear clothes all the time. Of course, they're going to get worn. But the visible mending is a creative way to, I think, acknowledge use and love in a way that that kind of class perspective missed out on, really. So that's my segue. It's not a segue. It's that's my side talk.
Well, Helen was talking about how much work it takes, and people don't always realize that. It's also a way of acknowledging the work, right? You can see it.
Do we want it? Do we want to spend the rest of the hour talking about women's unacknowledged work?
No, keep going.
Okay, so let's pretend I have my little so to prevent it from keeping tearing, I quickly sewed that up with a ladder stitch. And then I take my extra piece of t-shirt material that I used from when I shortened my t-shirt. You could use your kids' clean old underwear that they grew out of. I don't know. You can use any other kind of knit. So a lot of sewing, like Helen said, is like to like. I wouldn't put a woven patch on this. I wouldn't cut out something from jeans and put it on a knit because they behave differently. So I would find another knit that I don't need, and I would make a patch. And the nice thing about knit is that you can just cut out whatever you want. So I'm gonna make a heart because I like hearts.
And you have your heart in your sleeve then.
You can literally have your heart, which is worth it in and of itself, really. You gotta commit.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a bit of a wonky looking heart, but that's what my heart's like. A bit wonky. Okay. So I would pin this if I could find my pins.
So this you do want to have on the outside.
Yeah, this you do want to have on the outside.
Okay.
We're talking visible mending.
Yeah, yeah.
So you do want this on the outside. So like goes to like. I have my pretend repair there. I put my heart over, or I put my heart over like this. You cut a big enough patch and a little bit neater. I admit that's a little bit rough looking there. And you pin it on without stabbing yourself. Making sure you guys can see. Okay. Like goes to like. And because you have repaired that underneath, it's not going to pull or rub against your skin or get any bigger. This is just to support that. Okay. So then you would take now it's contrasting thread.
There you go. It's all planning ahead.
Totally thought about this.
Yes.
And then this time you can just do a straight up and down stitch. Okay. I would hide my knot. Let's pretend there's a knot in there. I would probably start underneath and hide a knot. And then this, you can just up and down. You can do this with a patch, with a like-on-like patch, because the two fabrics will behave basically the same way. Hopefully they'll have the same kind of stretch, right? So I would just up and down. I would straight stitch this all the way around. Okay.
Marnie, does it matter which way the knit is knit? Like, is it kind of stretchy in all directions, or is it like usually stretchy one way or not?
Yeah, most knits do stretch both ways. If this is something that you love and you want it to last and you want the patch to last, then yeah, it's a good question. The stretches should probably,
like if it's your knee or your elbow or something, you want to check it. Okay.
So this stretches this way, and my patch, even though it's a little bit felted, the piece of fabric was a little bit felted. It was an old wool sweater. It stretches the same way as well. So yeah, okay. I instinctively laid that the right way. So you just stitch all the way around. Okay. And
okay.
You got your patch. So that's a really basic patch.
Okay.
Okay. It's kind of like what Helen did for Annette with her sweater. Right.
Mm-hmm. That was so cute.
Yeah, it's super cute. And you can do it with with stains. You can cover stains. You can just bling it up if you're bored with your sweater. Okay. So that's the first kind. The second kind of repair, which I think you guys is kind of the main attraction, is this seed stitch kind of repair. So there are many wonderful ways of darning socks. I have seen socks darned where you can't even tell that there is a darn because there's a certain kind of stitch that you can do that looks like knit stitch, and it just blends in and it's absolutely wonderful. That is not the skill level that I am able to do. I'm quite comfortable admitting that. It's a darn that is basically a seed stitch over and under, and it makes a very sturdy repair. The kind of, you can see that the kind of the weight of the yarn is something in a sock wool weight. I don't always abide by that. So because my daughter does hand spun and I have a lot of it, you can see on this repair, I get all the little extras. So it makes me really happy. You can see on this repair, I've started this repair with some of her hand spun. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this, hopefully, and then I'll show you how to repair jeans using the same method. How's that? Well, it's kind of the same method.
All right.
Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. You will need socks with a hole, which you can tell that these socks are really well loved and kind of neglected because I didn't patch them when they first should have been patched. So now I've got 3 holes to do. There's my hole. I'm going to use a lacrosse ball because I happen to have it for rolling out my very sore muscles. You can use apples. I have a friend who uses apples. I don't know. What do you use, Tanya?
I used an orange.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It makes it smell good too.
If you stab it, it does.
Yeah. I've seen people use tennis balls too.
Oh yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Lost
I
my-
guess it depends on the size of the sock, right? Like you'd want something
Yeah.
that fits inside your sock.
Yeah, something that fits inside your sock. And what it's going to do, it's going to support the hole. You're going to put an elastic around it. Okay. Like this.
Well,
Oh, the elastic's a good tip.
This is, I got this in an antique store. and
Oh
I-
yeah, if you can find an
darning.
actual, I mean, you can buy a darning egg.
That's what I
um,
use this.
a
I use it
darning
like
egg.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's some-
and there's hand carvers that make darning eggs. So if you want to support other artisans, you can find, or if you have somebody who really does a lot of darning for your family, a loved one, you can, show your love by getting them a special darning egg.
And I've seen bigger ones too. They come in
Pardon me?
different sizes.
Yeah, there's different sizes. So my lacrosse ball seems to work. I don't think it would work on a kid's sock as much. So there's my hole, there's my lacrosse ball. I am going to find a needle that has a fairly large hole in it. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just want, there we go.
Yeah.
You just want something that will accommodate the weight of yarn that you're doing. So like I said, I have I get all the ends from my daughter's like weaving and spinning and stuff. I'm super lucky that way, and I'll pick something that's contrasting. One. Doesn't really matter if it's single ply or double ply or whatever ply. Let me find something. Of course, now everything matches. Wait, purple. I like purple. Okay, got my yarn. Okay, I'm gonna thread this. So the nice thing about darning wool, you can do this method with cotton. I would use a heavier cotton yarn then, like not an embroidery thread unless it was a really finely knit sock. So you can use, you can repair cotton socks the same way. Helen might know a little bit more about that. The nice thing about doing a repair like this on a wool sock is that, I mean, we've all, well, maybe we haven't, maybe people are more responsible than me. I mean, wool, when it is shrunk or when it comes under agitation, it'll felt, right? Or full. So this patch, as it's worn, will actually integrate itself into the sock better. Okay, it'll kind of become sturdier before it wears out, which is nice. All right.
Yeah. Marnie?
Yeah.
Hi. Sue just has a question.
Yeah.
So she has a hole in her knit leggings. By her size. So would you use a patch on that too, or some other?
So it depends on how large the patch is. If it's a really large patch, I would probably repair and sew over. If she's got time, then this method definitely would work. Okay. Someone else has asked if I've tried felting to mend holes in wool socks. So when you full wool, so if I tried to kind of repair this, just sew it together and then slightly felt my socks would be a little harder to put on. So when you felt or full wool, it gets a little stiff. So if I tried to do that with my socks, with my wool socks, they get a little hard to put on. Technically, I suppose you could patch them just like I showed with the shirt, but I think the wear and tear on your feet really requires a patch like this if you've got the time. I have tried to patch tights before, just sewing them up and putting a patch on, and I should have just spent the time beforehand just to do this method instead. So fair warning. It's a pretty straightforward method. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a warp, actually, just like in weaving. So I'm going to start beyond the edge of the hole, and I'm just going to go up. I'm going to go with the grain of the sock, basically. I'm just going to go up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay. Got a little too far there. Okay, I'm going to pull this through. Come on. Oh, maybe I did pick something too thick. There we go.
So Angie is saying you don't want the yarn to be too thick in the hole. If the hole is on the sole or the heel, because it'll be lumpy, right?
That is true. There are people in my family whose feet are more sensitive than others. My feet are not. So yeah, she's absolutely true. And this is why people learn different methods of darning. Like if you really want a smooth darn that not only looks invisible, the ones that look invisible will also feel invisible. So if you can put up with this, like if you use a finer yarn, yeah, it's going to be less lumpy. I don't particularly care. And also this is the wool I have available. So I'm using what I have. And once you wear it a couple of times, it does kind of, it's like Birkenstocks. You kind of wear into it a little bit. So it becomes a little bit more comfortable. So I'm just going to go up and down like this. Okay. You can see this part here has already started to fray from the hole was trying to get bigger. Let me go up and down. Just keep this on the camera here. Yeah, this is a pretty thick wool to be using, but I really enjoy the color. So when I get to the hole here, there's nothing to go up down with, okay? I'm actually just gonna leave it. I'm gonna go over the other side. When you do this, you have to make sound effects. You have to go doop, okay? And I'm gonna catch the other side a couple times with my up down. Okay.
So just to say, Marnie, that there's some questions here, but I'm going to be posting them maybe towards the end because it's about the backpack and themes, right? Yeah. So just so we're not getting confused with the darning part.
Yeah, let's stay on this.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really like if people have
saving your questions.
Specific questions. And then Helen can also I would love to hear Helen's some of those as well. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to make my little, so when you're weaving, the yarn that serves as the substrate is called your warp. So I'm going to make a warp and it would go back and forth, just like over here.
Yeah.
So do you see that? There's where the hole used to be. I've gone back and forth and back and forth, and I've made a warp.
Oh, you're doing a magic of television thing.
I'm taking my cake out of the oven.
Yes. Okay.
So
your warp is already done there.
Yeah, my warp's already done here.
Okay.
Okay. Is that clear to everybody that that's what I've done?
Yeah. So with your pink and the green one there, you did the same thing you just did with the black and white.
It's just finished. So this is so the stitch that I'm using is just a straightforward straight stitch. So here I'm just going up, down, and when I get to my hole, I'm laying a piece over so that I'm making a warp. And then I'm going up, down on the other side, switch, and then come back this way. Okay.
Hey, Marnie. Yep. So the reason you have that ball into there, I guess, also is because it keeps sort of the shape of your foot, or like you're kind of you're trying not to have the hole close in a way that it wouldn't close when it's on your body, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But that's only if that hole was on the heel.
No, it's because also it's the other reason is because I'm not darning with a knit stitch. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually darning with what would be called plain weave, which isn't as stretchy. The yarn itself is stretchy, mm-hmm. but it isn't stretchy. If you did it on a sweater, you don't have to use a ball. I do actually find it's way easier to work with. So I've tried to do this without having something underneath, but it's a little fiddly. So this just keeps everything nice and it's not movey about. I mean, knits will always, they're like, oh, can I move? I will move. And you're like, no, just stay in the same spot. Okay. Fixing you.
And then the warp, you're not trying to close the hole, right? You're not trying to close the gap. You're actually just letting it sit naturally.
I'm just letting it sit naturally.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's going to happen is, so I'm going to shift it. I'm going to shift my socks so that you guys can see the pink side. Okay. All right. And I'm going to still use my purple thread. When you start this, the other thing that's really important to remember is when you start, you'll see where I started this way back. Leave yourself a good long bit. Okay, so this bit here is, I don't know, 3 inches, 4 inches. Every piece that you use, you're going to weave back a little bit at the very end. Okay, so just remember that when you start, you don't knot it, because that is uncomfortable. Tiny little pebbles in your shoe is totally uncomfortable. So don't knot it. So I've got my warp already set up. Okay. And we're going to do what I did here. I started beyond the hole again. See, these are the edges of the hole. And I just go up, down, back and forth and back and forth. And then I get to the hole. Okay. So I'm going to start this. I'm going to leave myself a tail. Okay. And when I get to my warp, I'm actually just going to start weaving. So over, under, over, under, over, under. I'm saying over, under, opposite of what I'm doing. Under, over.
On the other side.
Yeah, sorry. So
if you miss a thread or two, does it matter?
Nope, because you're going to make a couple passes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a friend and some of her pictures are here. And in fact, there's a wonderful picture of a sock that she did, or I think it was a sweater. I don't know if you can find it and screen share it. It's very nicely even. There it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she's used actually a weight of wool slightly lighter than what the original piece is with. And she's been way more patient than me, and she's not used hand spun. So the wool that she's used for this is a really even, an even spin. I mean, my daughter does do very even spinning, but she likes to make art yarn. So some of her spinning is on purpose, thick and thin.
So Marnie, this sweater, it's really just still that same warp. Yeah. It's really just that same over under thing, right? It's not like she's following the
No.
Yeah, okay.
So you can see how the stitch is different, right? There's the knit stitch on the sides in the cream, and the middle is the gray is the over under, which is what I'm doing now, but in like much brighter colors and with much less patience.
Okay. So there is a question here about tights and stretched out waistband elastic.
Okay, that would be interesting.
Can you actually, so Valerie's tried sewing elastic to the waistband, but it never works very well. Do you have any ideas? So what we can think about is the, and Helen might have an answer to this as well, is the elastic actually sewed in?
Like,
you're kind of breaking up, Marnie.
The waistband, or is it just attached? Yeah, and then close it up again. But if it's sewed on, I'd have to think about it. That's gonna have to percolate in the back of my mind.
I know when I've tried it, you have to kind of stretch the fabric out.
Yeah, over.
As you put that elastic in.
Yeah. Yeah. So over, under, over, under, over, under. So I would keep doing this. So now I'm just building back my fabric of my socks. So you can see how on the way back, it's opposite. So here I've gone over this warp, and here I've gone under it.
Yeah.
Next one back, I'll make sure when I come up that I go over this. And sometimes you skip them and you realize that you've done the same one, but it doesn't matter, because what's going to happen then is you're going to get to the end. And actually what you're going to do is you're going to make another pass back. So you're going to get all the way to the end. You're going to go over under here, and you're going to switch it around. And then you're going to go in between the lines. You're going to do another round. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I can show you. I did one.
Yeah. How'd it go?
So I was hang on a second. I'm just gonna. So I did on these socks. These are these really great. This woman from Saskatchewan. Like they're alpaca wool. They're Saspaca. And we love them, and they've got, but they do, we wear them all the time. So they've developed these holes in them. So I did the same kind of thing you're doing. So I was gonna ask you about tucking in the ends, but you can really see like the back and forth.
Why don't we get to the end?
And I had a question too, because I turned them inside out, and they look like this. They're
right?
They're really, really smooth on the inside, and they're almost like the original
so
fabric.
So for me, it doesn't matter. And yeah, that's worth pointing out, is that if you turn them inside out and do this, you'll probably get a nicer finish on the reverse side.
I guess if you got the smooth on the inside, then that's.
Get it smooth on the inside. So
Yeah,
how
okay.
you finish an end off
Yeah.
is you take a little bit that you've, so Tanya, you have all those ends, right?
Yeah.
And you thread that back in to your needle. You don't have to make a knot. The reason you don't have to make a knot is because it's wool and it wants to adhere to itself. So I would just go a little further. I would go back and then I would go back again. Okay. So in a very short amount of space, you go 1, 2, 1, 2 back and forth, and then you can just cut it off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it might, once you're pulling it, it might go 1 stitch, but it doesn't really matter. It's going to integrate itself back into the fabric.
Okay.
It's pretty sturdy.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, what I've done is I've just gone like 1, 2, and then 1, 2 back, and then I've cut it off here, and it might pull and I might lose a stitch, but it's not going to fray. It'll integrate itself back into the fabric, especially if I was using thinner yarns.
Okay. And it's your foot's going to do some of the felting, I guess, right? Like you're going to be like just wearing it down. It's going to become.
The agitation of your foot is actually going to do some of the fulling.
Okay.
So Helen has. Sorry.
Oh, Helen.
Helen has a comment. Helen, I'm going to share your.
Because I have a feeling.
I've been watching the questions, and I would say for the tights, if you're going to try and sew elastic in, it's important to get elastic that fits comfortably around your waist, a little bit on the snug side, because just the act of sewing it in, I find, stretches it a little bit. And then I like to divide it into 4, like top, bottom, side kind of thing, and do the same with your pants, and then pin it at those 4 corners so you know you're stretching it evenly the whole way around. And I do find that if you're just going to sew elastic into one part of it, that especially is really not going to do the job very well. The other option is to add a channel to the inside of the leggings or the outside if you like the look. And then you can thread elastic through that, or just a string, and then you can have a waistband that's going to hold up your tights. And that might be a simple way to do it that's kind of adjustable, so it might be more comfortable. And as for the thin socks, sometimes what I do when my things are getting really thin, but they don't actually have a hole yet, so I would actually, instead of doing the whole thing of darning, I would do it the lazy way, which is just to go on a diagonal back and forth.
Yeah.
And then you don't necessarily have to do it the other way because it's held together. It's not going to come apart now.
It'll just last a little bit longer. Yeah. Yay.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Helen. Helen has tips.
Yeah.
What you eventually end up with is something like Tanya's shown, and I'm going to put this nice and close. So this is pretty sturdy. And it's a little bit nicely integrated. Let's see what it looks like on the inside. Oh, it looks like a sun. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. So this, it's a pretty versatile way of patching knits, especially ones that are a little bit heavier duty. Or if you want a really colorful patch on your elbow and you have time, you don't want to just sew one on, you can totally do this. You can use different colors of yarn. And the same kind of idea is what I use for patches on things like jeans. Okay, so we're going to end up with, okay, does anybody have any questions about the actual knits part of the repair? Anybody? Nope. Okay, sweet.
So just quickly, like on the t-shirt,
yeah,
would you would do like a patching thing, or would you do like the weaving technique you just did? Like, would you darn a t-shirt, or would you more likely just to do a patch?
It depends on how precious the t-shirt is.
Okay. I guess if it's like a merino wool t-shirt, you do it.
So, right, if I had some kind of knit top that was kind of fancy and I really liked, I might try to get a really thin yarn and the same material as my knit top and try to do a fancy kind of darning patch, okay? If it's a t-shirt I'm wearing around the house, or if I'm just going out in a t-shirt and I've ripped it and it looks otherwise cool, then I would totally do Helen's patch, like make it into something funky, right?
Mm.
Just add a patch on your shoulder or add a patch on the hem where you like snagged it on something, for sure. It is faster, right?
Yeah.
If it's a fancy top that I really like,
I just want to try it.
yeah, or if you just want to try it, right? Then yeah, for sure, play with it. The same kind of just basic straight stitch is useful also for your wovens. So this is, I actually cut this off of my son's jeans because he wanted shorts. And then I thought, oh, I'll just make like a little bag. But it did have a hole in it.
Sorry, just quickly going back to the sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Marnie?
Yeah.
Well, although I think you just answered this, I'm not quite sure. So Nancy says I have holes in my sweatshirt. So darn or patch. So you covered that, right? So,
yeah, I would patch it.
yeah, it's
if it's a
depending on
sweatshirt,
what
I would patch it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Lots of tiny holes in several areas. And the material to use to patch, something stretchy still, right?
Stretchy still.
Like
So
knit.
a good rule of thumb to remember from visible mending is like to like. Okay. So if you have a knit material that you're trying to patch, try to find a patch that's also knit. It's easier. It's certainly doable. Like if you have a cool patch that so my definition of cool would be like, I got a patch from the provincial park and I want to use it. So that's my definition of cool. But if you have a cool patch, okay, and you want to use it on your sweater, and go for it. Just if it's in a place under tension, just be aware that it might pull a bit, right? The advantage of using, it's like harm reduction for knits. So the advantage of using a knit fabric to patch a knit is that it's going to have the same kind of give, especially under tension, like at an elbow or something.
Right. So there's corduroy patches on your sweater. You can do them, but you should maybe like darn them underneath.
Oh yeah, I would darn them underneath, or at least stabilize it in some other way. That's an aesthetic choice.
Yeah.
So corduroy is woven, right?
Yeah, corduroy is woven. Yeah.
Okay.
Or jeans or something.
Yeah, corduroy counts. So you can tell. So sometimes it's hard to tell. So it's like I said, you can tell when something's woven if you cut it.
Oh, hang on, let me just pin you there.
Yeah, pin me.
I will say a pin.
If you cut it and it frays, I'm gonna cut two things. Hold on. Okay, here is my. Okay, hopefully this works. So here's my. I have to patch this anyway. So here's my knit, and I'm cutting it. Okay. Do you see how this edge stays? Okay. When I rub it,
it rolls.
It's pretty stable.
Yeah.
If I have a piece of linen here. If I cut my linen,
which is a weave, right?
This is a weave, so this is a woven material, and I start doing this.
Yeah, it frays.
Do you see how that frays?
Yeah.
That is one of the reasons why seams are finished on. So I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. That's why seams are finished on woven, like finished in a certain way on woven clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the two. Are there any other ways of putting? No, there's really only knit, and crochet kind of counts as a looped. Like there's different ways of making looped material. There's knot binding, there's crochet, there's knitting, but they all have to do with loops. And when you have loops, it's stable when it's woven, like an over under. No matter what the weave is, if it's a twill or anything else, it'll fray when you cut it. Okay, as you can see on my daughter's jeans. Okay, so you can go to Anthro and pay like $400 for a pair of jeans that have holes in them and fancy patches, or you can do it yourself. So this hole in this pair of jeans was even too big for my daughter, who is 16. So we added a bit of hand-dyed material that I had, and I've started to make a patch, and I'll show you the underside, okay? This method is actually really good for larger holes, okay? So you can see what I've done is I've cut out a large piece of material. Again, it's like to like, so it's a woven, this is just a woven piece of linen. And I've done a basting stitch, which is a really large running stitch just around to keep it stable. Instead of pinning it, it is not fun to try to do this method with pins in the way. I learned that from experience. You will see yourself. So I just run a basting stitch around. And you can see on the this little finished patch here, you can see where the original hole is. So this time I didn't use a contrasting material. I used a piece from I used a piece from the same jeans. And you can see the actual patch on this side, right?
Okay.
So I've taken the basting stitch out of here, but I would have basted this. You want to cut the patch larger than the hole. So this is actually bigger than the actual hole. See how the hole is smaller?
Yeah. Good tip.
I would have, huh?
Good tip. Mm-hmm.
I would have cut the patch bigger, and I would have basted it like the jeans. So you can see my not really contrasting stitch. Whoever said, can you please use contrasting stitches? Thank you for that reminder. So you can see how I've used really big stitches just to keep the patch in place so I don't have to fiddle with it. Okay.
Do you take those out after, or do you care?
Yeah, I
guess you would, right? It would look better, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be less distracting, I suppose. You could keep them in if you wanted to.
Yeah, but the stitching stays.
Yeah, I just took them out afterwards when I did the other one. Yeah, when I do them, I take them out afterwards. Mm-hmm. And they'll just slide out. You can stitch right on top of your basting stitch, and it'll just slide right out. It'll be fine. Okay, the kind of needle that you want, which hilariously I've kind of lost. There we go. Is nice long needle. This is I think technically it's a doll needle. You can do it with a shorter needle. This is way easier. You could buy a special sashiko needle. They're a little bit different. If I remember correctly, there's a curve to it, which makes gathering stitches on it a lot easier. I'm just going to use a nice long needle. And you can see I did the same thing. I didn't have to make a warp this time because the thing that's stabilizing my hole is the actual patch. Okay. So instead of making a warp and then using that to close my hole, I've first used my patch to close the hole. And now I'm just going to, instead of having to sew on a finished patch, I'm just going to do the stitching on top. I am going to unabashedly say, I am making a patch here. And I'm just going to, and this will keep it more stable. Okay.
Marnie,
if I just sewed the patch on, it would be okay. But the edges would fray, the underside would fray, and eventually the patch would come off a lot more quickly than if I do this.
And Marnie, do you trim off the little bits that are fraying already on the jeans, or do you? Because there's one. Sometimes there's like a threads going across. Would you? Yeah. Okay. Like down there. Yeah.
So yeah, I have done. I've cleaned up the edges. Especially once I get going, I realize that there's a particular spot that's just kind of annoying, and I'll just clip it back a bit.
Okay.
So I think on these jeans, so there's lots of holes there. I would just probably, actually on this, I would probably just put a patch over instead of underneath, right?
Yeah, so you keep the strength from the threads. Okay.
Yeah. You can, and the thing is that you can play with it. Leah, do you have those pictures that from? Yeah. So we have quite a few pictures with this kind of technique. You can definitely play with it.
Can you see it?
You see them, but only in
small.
Oh wait, because I have to unspotlight this, I think. So can you see?
You just have the wrong.
We have to see the whole folder rather than just the one picture.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, hang on. Do that again.
Yeah, I have some.
There
you
it is.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I have to move this box. Sorry.
So if anybody's interested in learning Shashiko, there's a fellow, Rob Jones from London, who is an expert in it, and he learned it in Japan, and he teaches some different varieties of Shashiko on Eventbrite.
Yeah, there's so many really talented people. It's an art in and of itself. I highly recommend if you want to, it just depends on the kind of learner that you are. We approach things, we try to make things as accessible as possible. So the way that I'm mending, you don't have to have a long needle. You can have a short needle. You don't have to have ever sewn before. No one's going to, the feedback about what kind of stitches you want to use. I mean, you can tell I am capable of making very even stitches. Did I particularly put effort into making my stitches even on this patch? No, because I actually really like the aesthetic. So it's really a flexible method. I have a friend who just started Sashiko, and she's really enjoying the kind of discipline of it and the kind of creativity that comes from sometimes kind of limitations. It's not a limitation, it's just like a method that leads to a certain kind of creativity. So this is a different method that leads to a different kind of creativity. The kind of thread that works for this is any kind of embroidery thread. I wouldn't use a wool yarn or anything like that. You want something, again, like to like. So this is a cotton embroidery thread on a cotton pair of jeans, on a, well, that's a linen patch, but it's the same kind of family. It's a bast fiber. Now I'm trying, now my brain just wait, is cotton a bast fiber? I think the weavers out there might know. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same kind of method as before, and I will give you a little bit of a tip. So it's a bit different. So I hold my needle like this. So instead of holding it, so very often if I'm doing over under, I use my leverage from on top. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm going over under. I'm kind of using my whole hand like this. I find with using a lot, when I'm trying to do a lot of running stitches and trying to keep my, trying to keep it even, if I hold it from underneath and then I'm just, so the light on this is weird, then I'm just going like this. And I'm just gathering stitches. And I think of it as, instead of pulling my embroidery thread through, I'm thinking of pushing my fabric onto my embroidery thread. And I don't know why I like that better, but it seems to make a more even stitch. So you know what?
A little bit like beading.
Yeah, it's like beading. And I'm going to take that lovely person's suggestion and get a contrasting thread, because I was going for a certain aesthetic with this, but that is really silly. So I'm going to get, I have a whole bucket of embroidery thread here.
Hey, I'm just for show and tell.
Yeah, show and tell's good.
Okay, hang on.
Okay.
Wait, while you're getting ready, hang on.
Yeah.
I'll just.
Okay. I'm just posting some more stitches. Hang on.
Okay. So this is like two different things.
Okay.
I had a giant rip in my knee. I fell, and let me see the inside. I can just cut it out. So that's just a patching behind. So the same kind of thing as Marnie's, but I just I cut a square. But it was kind of fun to do this because I had this fabric that had this pattern on it already, so I could kind of play off the pattern. And I didn't have to stitch all of it. I only stitched parts of it. And I kind of continued it up here because I mean, once you have it sort of stabilized on there, there's enough going across. It's strong enough. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to do all the way across all of it, but it was kind of fun just to as an inspiration to kind of play with the material. And hang on. And then these jeans, I actually tried fixing them once, And I didn't tuck the edges under, so it was all fraying. And so these ones are a bit more. And I just like kind of kept trying different things. Just got a lot of different things going on.
It's really a celebration of your butt, Tanya.
Yeah, it really is. So, but those are the same kind of, just playing with trying different stitches in here. So Marnie's doing running stitches, but I was just started trying to do little X's.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have another patch underneath that I was doing. So this is sort of my initial stabilization I did with all the red stitching. And Marnie, I used like kind of, it's called quilting thread, like it's a bit like a heavier thread, heavier cotton thread. It wasn't quite embroidery, and I used embroidery thread in some of them. So it's, you don't see it quite as much, but it seems okay.
Oh yeah, it'll work just fine. A sewing thread would try my patience is the only thing I would think. It wouldn't be as visible as far as pattern goes, right? It's because a part of this is the aesthetic of the actual pattern. Leah, we don't have that shot of the pants, the crotch of the pants with all of the X's on it, do we? Because that was lovely.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So that is,
but I was gonna show. So Georgina had a question. So if the patch is on top, you tuck the edges under, and not necessarily, right? Because
not necessarily.
I was gonna show so I did like a patch thing, and it's I did not tuck the edges under. I left them. Can you wait?
Yeah, mine is kind of fraying, so
sorry. So I sort of like the fraying part of it. So whoop. Sorry, wrong way.
Okay.
Oh, there. I kept the fraying edges actually because I like it. And I was just gonna quickly show the shoes because Sue mentioned the shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my shoes had like the holes here on the sides. Yeah. So I did the same darning method for the socks because these are like those knit shoes, right? Those, I don't know what you call them, like the sock shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You just sort of
I like how you just extended it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that kind of thing of being unabashedly like, no, this is visible mending, right? It's not like you just tried to keep it in the same spot. I'm just gonna run with it. And like,
well, I could have used black.
You could have used black. Yeah. Not nearly as fun. Okay.
I have one to show if you want to see another one.
Where are you? Oh.
Hang on, I'm gonna spotlight you.
So I did this for my husband's pants.
Oh, nice. Is it circular?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind moving it back a bit, April? Because it's a bit too close to the camera.
How's that?
Okay. So the light is a bit.
That looks great.
Okay. Yeah.
Myself on the camera, so I can't tell where it is. But
yeah.
I put a patch underneath.
Yep.
And then I put this one on top. And then I put little stitches around the edge going in.
Yep.
And then I did my circular pattern afterwards.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like it was filled in enough, so I put filled in with extra rows.
I think it looks great. I love circular.
Super filled in.
Yeah.
And my next part of this is around the cuff. I sewed extra fabric around the cuff, which was fraying, and I'm gonna do that method that you showed us with just the in and out running stitch.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about textiles are valuable, right? It takes a lot of energy and water and effort. It's why people only, when they had to hand make their clothes, they only had like 3 pairs of clothes, like 3 sets of clothes. If you have a pair of jeans is one of the most hard wearing things, but like your patch with the backup patch underneath is even better. It's like patch plus, right? So if I wasn't just going for the aesthetics of this, if this was my son's actual knee and I really needed this to last, I would have done exactly what you did. I would have put this patch underneath like I did. And then I probably would have put another patch on top with a finished edge. And then I would have done the stitching over top. So that thing is probably going to outlast the rest of the pants then.
Well, at the bottom, at the cuff, I wrapped it around the cuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was the right way or not.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the only way to really keep the fraying in check.
The cuff from fraying, that's brilliant. And Helen, I think Helen spoke earlier about, we had a similar question on a previous workshop with a fraying pillowcase edge. So yeah, the same kind of thing where you could use ribbon, because ribbon's really nice because it has finished edges already. And so you can just sew that on, or like you did, you can just put another piece of fabric on top. And I think Helen probably has some tips.
Yeah,
about
what
that as
I would
well.
do. Yeah, what I would do there is
What do you think?
I have a couple ways to do it. There's one on my Instagram that I just did yesterday where you unpick the edge and you cut it off at the frayed bit, and then you use that kind of like bias tape and sew it to the outside and then turn it back inside and redo the hem. So you end up losing about a 1/4 inch, but that seam mark is in the same spot. That might not have been super clear, just me explaining it, but there's pictures on my Instagram. Or undo the hem, make it a little bit shorter and redo it. So then maybe it might not fray as much too.
Yeah, well, it's so frayed because they are a little long.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
when
so-
you do your stitching, do you ever use your sewing machine?
I find hand stitching a little bit more, like it's easier to get into the nooks and crannies. If I was to put a patch on, say, a shirt front, like a button-up shirt front that tore maybe, I might do a hand stitch repair of the hole, but I might sew a patch on. But hand stitching is what lets me get, like, I could not do this on a machine. Can I do something? No, I can't get, I don't know how I would get this. What I would end up doing is I get really enthusiastic and try to do this on my machine, and then I would probably sew the two sides of the pants together. That's I'm gonna make this quick and easy, and then my pants would just be sewn together. So yeah.
Well, with this one, I just sewed the patch on with the sewing machine to hold it on in place.
That you can
So I
do.
didn't kill my hands with a million
Yeah.
things.
So, but on the edge there, it's accessible, right? So if you just use a zigzag stitch on the end of the patch, that's even faster. If you wanted to turn it under with an iron and then do a straight stitch on your machine, that's a little bit more stable. It just depends on how quick and dirty you want to get. Yeah.
So Marnie, we have like some questions from YouTube.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hi, YouTube.
So one is there any place for acrylic yarns in this? I have a stockpile from the 70s. And I'm also really interested in this because we get a ton of acrylic yarn donations also.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So you ready, everybody? This is my rant on acrylic yarn. Okay. If you ever get caught on fire wearing acrylic sweater or acrylic anything, it will melt to your skin. So that tells you what I think about acrylic yarn. Okay. It's a plastic. You're wearing a plastic. A lot of what we talk about in Works in Progress and in the sustainable textiles world is how do we deal with synthetic yarn? Like, what do we do with synthetic clothes, right? There's lots of things you can do with them. Acrylic yarn in and of itself, you can make something. I would advise, if you wanted to use up acrylic yarn, I would make something that has that is not going to be high use, so it's not shedding a lot of microplastics into the world. So if you wanted to use up, so you can't just dump the acrylic yarn, then it's just there forever. And when archaeologists 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years in the future, they're like, oh, it's the plastics age, because there's like a layer of acrylic yarn that's in the landfill site, okay? So we wouldn't encourage anybody just to dump acrylic yarn. And we have this same issue at the Hand Weavers and Spinners Guild, okay? Because we get a lot of donations as well. Recycling acrylic yarn is almost impossible because textile recyclers shred things, and they do not like yarn because yarn gums up the shredder. So instead of making something that is perhaps meant to be worn, like a sweater, you could repurpose it into something that's going to be not used as much, like a pillow. So if you want to showcase your talents as a knitter or a crocheter or a weaver, and you have all this acrylic yarn sitting guiltily in the corner of your studio or in your basement, make something beautiful. Like make something beautiful out of it that's going to be stable, that'll last a long time. That perhaps can be made into something else in the future. So this idea of sequestering synthetics is actually really important. And I know that there's lots of people out there who are trying to think of different ways, using it as a building material. I don't have it here, but all of my scraps, which includes some polyester, all of my scraps go to stuffing cushions, that like the kind of Turkish style Ottoman kind of heavier cushions. So I make cushions and I use all of my scraps to stuff them. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you had a lot of acrylic yarn, you could do that too. You could just use it as stuffing. It just makes a more sturdy stuffing than we're used to with the polyfill, right? Long term, I would love if it was illegal to make synthetic. Like, someone want to start a petition? As I just don't see how it's a legal thing. It's just such a long-term issue.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any ideas what you can do with acrylic yarn? Like, we've got a lot of people participating right now. What do you do with your acrylic yarn?
I do a lot of stuffing. For stuffed animals, I find it makes really dense stuffed animals. So if you make kind of bigger ones, it's kind of fun to have this heavy, dense thing that you hug. It's like a very different feeling.
Yeah.
And then I also had a project making cushions for classrooms. So I took a ton of materials that weren't going to get recycled any other way, stuffed them into cushions, and I gave them to my teacher friends, like 30 to a classroom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a really good way just to, like I said, sequester it. Especially if you're going to make something like cushions, are you going to use it as stuffing? I tend to, with the Ottoman cushions, I tend to make an inner case and then an outer covering, because you can't wash it. Like if somebody, I don't know, I have a million different ways in my head how that Ottoman could get like irreplaceably, like my son trips holding a thing of macaroni and cheese, and like, what am I going to do now? So I always make a cover if it's going to be cushions, so that I don't have to think about washing that mass of stuffing. So I do have, like, I don't have an Ottoman cushion, but like, this isn't very attractive, but it's useful for demonstration purposes. So this is my haul of just scraps. That includes like threads, little thread ends and stuff like that. I just wait until I have a mass of it, and then I just make another cushion.
So Natalie said she's made a few beanbag chairs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just gonna. We made this thing too. Marnie did a quilting thing with us before, so this is like just scraps of fabric together, and then the inside is filled with scraps, and it's made out of a t-shirt.
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 Yeah. So that was just a t-shirt.
With t-shirts.
Bottom. Yeah, we do a lot of things with like, I think people were mentioning in the chat doing because t-shirts are actually a really great material. They're stretchy and they don't fray because they're a knit, and so you can cut them pretty thin and you don't have to worry about them, and they can become like another kind of yarn. You can knit with them. You can do all the things you would do with yarn with the t-shirts. We've got another short. Hang on.
Yeah, there we go.
There it is. That's crocheted, and I just had it at my feet, and that's crocheted from scraps.
Yeah.
I've been using t-shirts to make the straps on all of my. So I've been sewing a lot of masks. So, and I use t-shirt yarn because we like the tied masks rather than around the ears. T-shirt yarn is great for that. So I've been like, my husband's like, you need to stop sewing masks because I'm running out of t-shirts.
Okay, yarn. You can, when you make felting, I've been experimenting a little with felting. If you're making like stuffed animals or something that's a solid piece of felting, then you could use the acrylic yarn on the inside to make a ball, and then you put your wool fibers around the outside and affix them into the acrylic ball that you've made.
Yeah, that works too. Anything that's like a substrate or a structural thing you can use.
You can even use scraps of fabric inside of that if you wanted to.
Yeah, you totally can. Yeah. There's lots of uses for it.
Yeah.
So, or hair, I guess.
Yeah, we're kind of reaching the end of the workshop, right?
Already?
Yeah. Sorry, can I just like quickly read like the two questions that we had like gone through earlier? And this was like about fixing a nylon lightweight backpack with a pocket. Pocket's edge where it's connected to the seam has begun to fray into the body of the pocket. So any suggestions about the kind of thread I should use and what kind of fabric? I was gonna say I've used like old umbrella fabric to repair backpacks. That's one. But the thread, normal cotton thread.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be stretchy.
No,
Yeah,
no.
right, because it's a backpack. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
And
if seams, I have something along the lines of that, like the seams start coming apart, how do
yeah,
you
that's
keep
the
those
other
together?
question. Yeah. For like things that are like sort of coming apart, like seams.
Like maybe your jeans
not
are a little
like
too tight.
well-made stuff that just sort of. I guess you also would.
You can stabilize it with a patch.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've stabilized pockets on things like backpacks and stuff with a patch, with the understanding that I've just lost a little bit of room in the pocket. But Helen might have, or somebody else in the audience might have some tips.
Well, I do have one tip, and that's if you're doing something that's been serged together too close to the edge. I remember this comment. Normally when you're serging something, it's probably going to be a stretchy fiber. So if it's too close to the edge and it's coming apart, you can just sew down beside the serging, but make sure you use a stitch that's, if you're hand sewing, goes back on itself, or if you're sewing on a machine, has some width to it, because you want it to be able to stretch with the fabric and not just snap. And if it doesn't have any sideways or looped around kind of qualities to the stitch, then the thread will snap and you'll have a hole again.
Okay, thank you.
Be like, oh no, I get my mending skills out again. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we're at the end of our workshop. Shall we turn it over back to Annette?
Sure.
Thank you,
So-
everybody.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was super fun. It seemed like the time just flew by. I think we could have gone even further. It was great. I learned so much, and I think everyone on the call and on the workshop did as well today. And I think we also made some new connections. So I think that's great in the mending community. So on behalf of EcoFair Toronto, I'd like to thank all of the event organizers, presenters, and behind the scenes volunteers that made today's event such a great success. And I'd like to thank you all for participating. We had almost 50 people stay on for the whole thing. So that's great. Again, not only in Toronto, but around the world. So obviously this is something that has some momentum behind it. And what also is pretty cool is that we're doing a mending workshop during Waste Reduction Week in Canada. So this is another way that can also help us to reduce waste. So thank you to Leah. Thank you to Helen. Thank you to Tanya, and thank you to Marnie. And again, thanks to all the tech people behind the scenes as well. We'd love to have your feedback on today's event. So please take a moment to share your thoughts. There's going to be a link to a really, really short EcoFair survey in the chat, and everyone is encouraged to fill it out. I'm also going to send an email out to everyone as well. And don't forget that this is just one of many events going on. So for the EcoFair Toronto website, there's other exciting workshops that are coming up. So tomorrow we have actually a Micro Madness film discussion, but we also have some free screenings of films. So 2040 is going to be screening for free until November 8th. Microplastic Madness is going to be screening over the weekend in a discussion. And the website for EcoFair includes all of this and other fun things to do, not only online events, but there's also opportunities for eco tours in Toronto. So we've had some volunteers put together biking or walkable eco tours across the city in different wards. So there's some links there, as well as highlighting a lot of green and sustainable vendors in the city that we wanted to be able to give some promotion and spotlight to, just like Helen. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this event, and we hope to see you again. So please complete the survey, and happy mending, and enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Annette.
Well done.
Annette.
Well done, everyone.
Thanks.
Helen's Instagram, please.
Yeah, sure. It's
we'll
at
put that.
Helen Men's PO. I think it was also in the chat.
Oh, I couldn't. What is it, Helen's?
I'll type it in right now.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm sitting here with the mobile ready to type it.
There we go. Helen Men's.
That's excellent.
Thank you so much. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. That was great.
Oh, brilliant.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Okay,
So far.
like-
I was up at 5 o'clock this morning. It's now 20 to 7. Bye.
Oh, wow. Early right.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so nice to make that
Thanks.
connection.
It was great fun. Bye.
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 Nice to meet you.
Good day. Yeah.